So in case you don't know me, I'm quite fond of horror movies and films for a more adult audience, but at the same time I'm fond of animation as well. Yet there are movies that apparently a lot of people don't talk about that much. Sure, An American Tail, which I already talked about, is one of them, but what about Disney? If there's one animated Disney movie that I think hardly anyone remembers, it's 1988's Oliver and Company. This is one of those films that I haven't seen in a long time since I was a kid, and every time I see an image or a clip of this thing on YouTube or elsewhere, I was surprised by how much I remember from it afterwards. So now that we revisit New York City with Oliver and the Dog Gang, will a comeback be worth it, or should the movie be left behind? Well, let's find out. But first, a little backstory. In the mid-1980s, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg held a meeting with the animation staff in which story artist Pete Young had an idea to adapt the novel Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens into an animated feature, but with dogs. And so the idea quickly went into production under the working title Oliver and the Dodger. You get it? Because Dodger is the first member of that dog gang that Oliver meets. Despite the film being released on the same day as The Land Before Time on November 18th, 1988, it still became a box office hit by grossing more than $120 million worldwide on a budget of $31 million, and was even the first animated movie to pass more than $100 million in its initial release. However, despite it being successful at the box office, it still received mixed reviews from critics. So now that we know a bit of the history of this movie, let us now really take a look. Now before I get into the story itself, I want to start off with the songs first, since Disney is known for their musicals.
Now once upon a time in New York City.
I'm street smart, I got New York City heart. Not for my vanity, but for humanity. Each little step a pose.
Admittedly, the songs aren't really anything special, especially when you might compare it to Disney's Renaissance that came shortly afterwards, but you know what? They're fine enough to listen to. Now let's get into the plot. This little kitten, who would later on be named Oliver, wanders through New York City looking for food when he meets Dodger, the leading dog. After a musical number, we meet the rest of the gang and Fagin, who is having trouble paying his debt with the movie's villain, Sykes. During the next day, Oliver gets taken from this girl named Jenny, who gets permission from her parents to keep him. Unfortunately, Georgette is not pleased with that. Nevertheless, Oliver and Jenny have a wonderful time together. The following day, after Oliver gets rescued from the gang, Fagin finds out about the cat's new home and gets an idea to get the money he needs, which doesn't work the way he hoped, and Jenny gets kidnapped by Sykes. In the end, they rescue the girl and Oliver lives on in Jenny's home. Okay, I will admit we've seen elements from the story done before, especially with kidnapping children, but frankly, since this movie runs for only like 70 minutes, I don't think it's going to bother you that much. Then there's the animation, which I honestly can't say much about. Even if the story isn't that well written, at least the animation knows how to be on point. The settings and backgrounds are nicely done, and they went for a more realistic and natural look for the humans. As for the dogs, they can be more like cartoons where they can be both walking on four legs or go anthropomorphic when their front paws become hands. However, the lowest point of the movie would have to be the characters, simply because they really don't have much of a personality or anything that makes them stand out. I already mentioned Dodger, who's the leader of the dog gang. Tito is a small but energetic chihuahua. Francis is like the Shakespeare of the movie. Fagin is their owner and is having a hard time to pay his bills. And like I said before, Mr. Sykes is the movie's villain. The rest, on the other hand, or Pa, they don't really have much of a personality or anything like an interesting backstory. The same can be said about Oliver and Jenny, except that one is a homeless kitten who's happy to finally have a home, and the other is the daughter of a rich family. Granted, the performances that Natalie Gregory and Joey Lorenz gave them are well done. Heck, everyone from the cast did a good job, it's just the character development that the movie lacks in. Overall, I will agree that Oliver and Company is one of Disney's weaker films. It does have poorly developed characters and the story isn't that memorable, but it has nice musical numbers and beautiful animation to not be a complete waste of time. So if I were to rate this thing, a 6 out of 10 would be enough. Not a great film, but harmless enough for a younger audience. See you later, dudes!